Hi, Julie. So today we're going to talk about painted turtles. We have a bunch of turtles that live here at New Hampshire Audubon. Today we're going to focus mainly on our painted turtles. For those of you that are new to this type of event that we're doing here, we are I guess I should start. I am from New Hampshire Audubon, if you didn't know that yet. I work here at our Concord location, so the main headquarters is the McLean Center. Our main focus here is protecting New Hampshire's wild environment for people and animals. So basically how we do that is through several different branches of our organization. So we have education, which is my main focus. So I focus on education through education programs, through with our ambassador animals, so things like our raptors, our reptiles. So education, and then we do things through our sanctuaries and land management. So we have a bunch of different sanctuaries and centers all over the state where you can go hiking. Some of them actually have centers. Some of them are just sanctuaries where you can go walk and see nature and explore. And then we have policy, which is, not always as super exciting as education and things, but it's a really important piece of what we do here at New Hampshire Audubon. So we have education, sanctuaries, land management, policy, and then we have some biologists who work here, so through conservation of different species and things. So those are the main kind of focuses of what we do here. We are a independent Audubon, which means that we aren't connected in any way to the National Audubon. We do all of our own fundraising and everything. Basically, we are able to do what we do through the help of you guys. So without you guys supporting us, we wouldn't be able to continue to do what we do, unfortunately. So please just consider supporting us in any way that you can, and watching things like this and supporting us is an amazing way, and I hope you guys are all enjoying watching these. Hopefully we can continue them. We have lots of animals here, so I can imagine that this will continue on for weeks and weeks. So today we're going to talk about painted turtles. We have 3 of them that live here at our center, and they're all here for various different reasons. 2 of them are actually sisters, and one of them is a third that we acquired last year that was actually living at our Amoskeag Fishways location. So that turtle is here with us now, and we could start with her. So this is our painted turtle. We call her painted turtle number 3. So one of the reasons that we don't give names to any of these, if you watched our barn owl video, you knew that we don't give them names because they are wild animals, and we try to keep them as wild as possible by just calling them what they are. We call this one painted turtle 3. It gets a little tricky when we have 3 painted turtles, so painted turtle 1, 2, and 3. But they all have different characteristics that make them unique, so we can really tell them apart just by that. So this is painted turtle number 3. I'll show her to you. These painted turtles get their name actually because they look like they are painted. So she has all these orange colors on her, yellow on her head, orange on her legs. She is wet because she was just in the water. So, yeah, this turtle is actually kind of a special turtle. She was a turtle that was found in the wild. She's actually missing, let's see if I can show you here. She's actually missing some digits on her front feet. So we think that it was from frostbite. She was found in the wild, and basically an animal that couldn't go back to the wild because she wouldn't be able to survive on her own. She gets around just fine. She lives in a nice big tank where she has lots of water, so she can swim around and things, and she gets around just fine. And even just crawling around here on the floor, she can move around just good. But in the wild, she really probably wouldn't be able to get away from predators and things, so she lives here with us, and she makes a really awesome ambassador animal. So being able to teach kids about, predators and things that might eat these types of turtles, or talking about painted turtles in general. So this is our first painted turtle, and then we have two others, which we'll get into in a little bit. But what do you guys want to know about painted turtles, or turtles, I guess, in general? If you have any questions about them, feel free to drop them in the comment box, and I can answer them. I'll kind of shuffle through the three of them. They look very similar, but I can kind of try to show you the different characteristics that they all have. So this one is, we can tell her, by the way, she is missing her feet. This one is actually a little bit of a, I will say, a feisty turtle. So she, we don't want to ever try to put our fingers near her face, because she will try to bite. And it's not that she wants to bite me because she's a mean turtle. It's just that my fingers probably look like worms to her. Which leads me to my first question here from Todd. He says, do they eat bugs? Absolutely. So these guys in the wild would eat any kind of bug, really. They like to eat the worms that maybe are living in a pond type setting. So these guys are predominantly found in freshwater ponds, streams, maybe a swampy area. So any types of bugs and things that are living in there, they're definitely going to eat. Do turtles live as long as tortoises? That's a good question. So these guys will not live as long as tortoises per se. As we know, tortoises can live for like hundreds of years, which is crazy to think about. These guys in captivity typically live between 25 and 30 years. In the wild, they tend to live that long. And then in captivity, they can live upwards of like 50 years. I don't unfortunately know how old this turtle is, just because she came to us from another location and they didn't have much info on her. So I don't know how old she is, but she is a healthy turtle, so hopefully she'll live for a long time. What do turtles do in the winter? Do they burrow in the mud? Good question. So yes, in the winter time, these turtles are actually gonna go into hibernation. So when they're typically swimming around in water that is nice and warm, in the wintertime, we know that water gets really cold, and the water is going to freeze over, and these guys are actually going to kind of go down into the mud, or maybe it's a little bit warmer, and they're going to hold their breath, which is crazy to think about, for like 4 months when they're going to hibernate. So typically our winter time is when these guys are hibernating. So they have some special adaptations that basically allow them to stay hibernated for the entire winter time, and then as things start to thaw out and warm up, they're gonna kind of not come back to life because they didn't die, but kind of warm back up and start swimming back around and enjoying the warm weather. Good question. Why do painted turtles have colored shells? That's a good question. So they have colored shells kind of just because that's the way they are. It's like saying, why do you have brown hair, or why does somebody have brown hair? It's just the way that they're born and the way that they grow. And it kind of helps them differentiate between different turtles. So their colored shells are just the way they look. Good question. James wants to know if male turtles look different than female turtles. Are they bigger, different markings? So yes, the way you can tell between a male and a female turtle is from the underside of their shell. So this is a female turtle, and I will get a male turtle so we can compare, because all of our painted turtles are females. So the underside of their shell, actually, you could see this one is pretty flat. If I put it to the side, it's also pretty flat. The difference is that males have kind of an indent in their shell, and then females have a flat shell. And the reason for that is so the female turtles can actually have room to store their eggs inside of their shell before they lay them. So let me grab a male turtle so you can see the difference. All right, so this guy is a different species of turtle. He is a box turtle, and we'll save him for a little bit later, hopefully. But you can see the difference in his shell as he has this indent on his shell. So the males don't need that much space in order to hold eggs, because they don't lay eggs. So if I hold the difference up here. So you can see how this one has an indent and this one is flat. So that's the difference between the males and the females. Somebody asked if the painted turtle number 3 is getting dizzy. She might be, so we're gonna give her a little break and I'll bring out one of the other turtles. Okay, so this is painted turtle number 1. As you can see, she looks pretty similar to painted turtle number 3. She has her full front feet though. She is a pretty energetic turtle, so she typically likes to be swimming in her water most of the time, and she doesn't love to be held here, but for the sake of our program, she's going to hang out with us. So the reason that this turtle is here with us at New Hampshire Audubon is because her and her sister, which we'll see in a little bit, they were actually taken from the wild as hatchlings, so fresh out of the shell, fresh out of the egg, if you will, and they were taken as pets. So somebody maybe found them near a pond and thing and decided that they wanted to take them in as pets. And as we know, as we kind of talked about, they can live for 30 to 50 years. So in captivity, especially, they're going to live longer. So when you think about having a pet for 50 years, that is a true lifelong commitment that you have to make. So somebody unfortunately decided that they, just weren't interested in having a turtle anymore. And instead of taking them back to the wild where they wouldn't survive and they wouldn't really do well, they decided to bring them to New Hampshire Audubon, where they knew that they would be taken care of and they wouldn't have to worry about anything like that. So it's really important to remember not to take things from the wild. So one little lesson that we hopefully will learn here today is to leave wild animals where they are and not take them as pets, because they are wild animals. And then when we take them as pets, they can't go back to the wild. So think about that. And when you consider getting a turtle that they can live for a really long time. So this turtle was actually brought here in 1999, which means that she's at least 21 years old. And she's been around longer than me, so I don't know how old she was when she first came to the center, but so she's at least 21 years old. How many different kinds of turtles do you have? So we have 3 painted turtles. We have a box turtle, which you guys just saw. We have a wood turtle, and then we have a red-eared slider. So 4 different types. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 different types. This is a good question. How are they attached to their shells? So some people might think that turtles can actually come out of their shells, kind of like hermit crabs. How hermit crabs maybe get too big for their shell and they decide to move on and find a new shell. These guys can't do that. They're actually connected to their shell with their spine. So their shell is basically their spine. So let me grab one of these. So this is, I'll put her down for a minute. This is a alligator snapping turtle shell. So this is just a really good example of what a shell looks like on the inside. So if you look here, you can actually see where the vertebrae, so what our spine is made up of, connects the turtle to the shell. So a turtle can't come out of their shell. They're connected to it. They're always growing, which is one of the really cool things. So when you think about how a hermit crab gets too big for its shell and has to move on and maybe find a new shell, these guys are just always growing with their shell. So they can't come out of their shell, and they're connected basically by their spine. And then inside they have this kind of skin-like stuff, and it's it's basically what holds everything in. It's basically like our skin. So they're fully connected to their shells. Yeah. Ooh, Liam would like to know, why do they have flat hands? So we talked a little bit about where these guys would live. They live in typically water, right? Which means that they need to be able to swim really well. So these flat hands that they have are actually we'll call them webbed. So they are actually help the turtle move through the water really well. So if you've ever worn like flippers in the water, you know that they can help you go really fast through the water and help you kind of move quicker than you normally would. So they have these webbed feet that allow them to basically swim because they are an aquatic animal. That was a really good question. Should we report sightings to you? Turtles have been laying eggs in my backyard for years. I guess it depends on what kind of turtle it is. If it's like a painted turtle, probably not. These are the most common turtles that we have here in New Hampshire, which means that we see them all the time. They're pretty abundant. So something like a spotted turtle or maybe even a wood turtle or a Blandings turtle, those turtles are maybe a little bit less common. And if you have those, it would be probably important to report them to us so we know that where they are and that there are some in the state. Really good question. Claudia wants to know what is the oldest type of turtle. That is a good question. I don't think we have any like old turtles. Are we talking like in terms of like what get to be the oldest? Because I think that those are like the tortoises, like the Galapagos tortoise. Those guys live to be really, really, really old. Good question. Is it the same as a red-eared slider? That's a good question. So no, these guys are actually different. We do have a red-eared slider that lives here at our center. She is actually much bigger than this one. They look pretty similar. They just have a few different characteristics, and we actually don't have red-eared sliders living here in New Hampshire. They just don't live here. They live more in like the southern parts where it's a little bit warmer. But our red-eared slider is actually a new addition as of last week. So she was actually living at the Russell Elementary School up in Rumney, New Hampshire. She's one of the ambassador animals for their school, and she goes there and teaches the kids all about turtles and things. So she, unfortunately, the school was closing, just like many of you are at home right now. So she is living here with us until hopefully school starts back up and she can return to her classroom. But yeah, she's kind of fun. They named her Shelly, so she's a new addition to our turtle gang right now. What eats turtles? So there are lots of things that eat turtles. We have a turtle here at our center that he's missing, similar to our painted turtle number 3, he's missing his 2 front feet. He was attacked by an otter. So otters like to eat turtles. So when you think about different creatures or different wildlife that are going to live in a pond or a stream or a swampy area with a turtle, it might be something that might eat it. So something like a otter, raccoons really like to eat turtles. I'm trying to think what else. Looking around my room fisher really like to eat turtles. Potentially bobcats. So there's lots of different things that are going to eat these guys, and these guys, we know, have this really hard shell it's called keratin, which is kind of the same thing that our fingernails are made out of, but stronger. And so the shell is really strong, but things that are going to eat it have to get really creative with kind of cracking through their shell and eating them. But here at our center, they don't have to worry about that. Do all the painted turtles live together in the same enclosure? They don't, actually. I can take you on maybe a little bit of a tour to show you their enclosures. They each have their own tanks that they live in. Our 2 painted turtles that came together as sisters actually lived in a tank together for a while, but they used to fight, as probably you and your siblings do. So now they have their own tanks, own spaces to hang out, and don't have to worry about, fighting with each other. Let me see if I can take you and see if I can take you around. So this is the enclosures that they each have. So this is Painted Turtle 1 and this is Painted Turtle 2, and they have these basking rocks that they can get up on. They have heating lamps. so that they stay warm and get the right nutrients that they would typically get in the wild. So these are the other two painted turtles, and then the third painted turtle actually lives down the hallway, and hers is very similar to those. She has a basking rock and everything she needs. So yeah. Let's see. How many eggs do they live? That is a good question. So these guys can lay anywhere from 4 to 10 eggs a year, or a hatch. And they typically, so the way that reptiles typically work is they focus mainly on trying to lay as many eggs as possible. So when you think about it in terms of, like, let's say a mammal, so a bobcat. So when bobcats give birth to something, they typically only have like 1 or 2 babies that they're going to put all of their energy into taking care of and making sure that those 2 survive. So something like a reptile, like a turtle or a snake, is actually going to put most of its energy into just laying as many eggs as it possibly can. And so they lay all these eggs, and they hope that a majority of them survive. So not all of them are going to survive. I guess it depends on like the environment and you know, how many eggs were laid. But they put all their energy into having a lot of babies, and then if they hatch, hopefully a majority of them hatch, but not all of them hatch. And so they typically lay between 4 and 10 eggs and hope that the majority of them hatch, but not all of them do, unfortunately. Yeah, really good question. When the babies hatch, do they ever find their mother? That is a good question. And I don't know. I think that if let's say a painted turtle laid their eggs along or around a pond or something, the painted turtles are probably going to grow up in that pond. So maybe, I don't know. I don't know if they would like know that it's its mother, or so kind of going off the reptile laying eggs mammal thing. These guys really, they, you know, lay their eggs and they hope that a bunch of them survive, and they don't really like take care of them. They don't like teach them how to hunt or do anything like that. They kind of just like kind of send them out on their own and hope that they know what they're doing. When you think about the bobcat, they will raise the babies and teach them how to hunt, teach them how to find food, teach them how to protect themselves. So something like a mammal is kind of going to take care of their baby, where something like a turtle, unfortunately, is just going to, you know, kind of send it out on its own. Yeah, really good question. How big can the turtles get if they keep growing throughout their life? So, we'll pick on painted turtle number 2 here. So these guys, I said that they were around 21 years old. So you can imagine, you know, not super big. When they grow, it's a really, really small amount of growth. So one of the cool things about these guys is they have what we call scoots on their back. So these things are all called scoots, and they have these different pieces. Typically a turtle has 13 scoots on their back, and they will actually shed their scoots. So similar to a snake, when a snake sheds, they shed their skin and it kind of comes off in one whole piece, hopefully. These guys, when they shed kind of individual scoots here. But as they're growing, they get kind of too big for their shell, similar to a hermit crab, but they can't move out of their shell. So their shell is ever growing with them. So as their body grows, their shell grows. But it's not a whole lot of like noticeable growth. It's kind of like really, really, really small. So over time they can, you know, get bigger, but it's not a huge amount. So when you think about a painted turtle firstborn, they're probably only like this big, so pretty small. And you can see the growth that she has, you know, grown over the years. But this is 21 years of growth at least, so not a whole lot of growth. Yeah. Are turtles territorial? Do they fight other turtles in their area? They might. I guess it depends if they might protect their like egg nest, if you will. They might they might protect their territory, but I think when you think about how many turtles probably live in like one, let's say a pond, I don't think that they can be super territorial just because, you know, there's probably a lot of them living in their pond, but they might be around their nest, but probably not. I know we said that these two fight when they were in their tank, but we're also talking a relatively small tank. So when you think about a large pond, how many of them, you know, have their kind of their own spaces and things? Good question. Let's see. What other questions do you guys have? Let's talk about what these guys eat. So these guys, in the wild, we talked about it a little bit, but if you missed it, they are eating things like bugs. So bugs that are kind of maybe in the water, flying around, landing on top of the water, maybe swimming around in the water. Some turtles will eat fish, like little small fish. There are some turtles that will actually eat other turtles' eggs, which is kind of crazy to think about. And in the wild, they would eat a lot of the like aquatic vegetation that is growing in the pond. So things like, I don't want to say seaweed because that's not what it is. But things like plants that are growing in the water, and they might even go out and maybe find some, like, as we know that blueberries grow kind of along the edge of watery aquatic things or places. So blueberries would be something that they might find in the wild. So here in captivity, they get lots of veggies and fruits and things. So the majority of their diet is the veggies. So really like leafy greens. So things like kale and spinach, and right now they're eating some arugula. So lots of leafy things, and then they will get the treats of the fruit. So things that one of their favorite fruits is bananas, which typically they would not find in the wild here, at least in New Hampshire. But before I started, somebody was feeding them, or we were feeding them bananas, so that they became accustomed to that, and they really love it. They really like strawberries, which might be something that they would find kind of maybe around the area of the pond that they could snack on, wild strawberry. So they do like the leafy stuff, but not as much as the sweets that are the like strawberries and the fruits and things. And then they're eating things like mealworms that we can actually grow right here at our own center. They're eating things like little bugs, so beetles that kind of evolved. So the way a mealworm works is it goes in different life stages and ends with a beetle. So they like to eat the beetles that the mealworm turns into. They will eat like red wigglers. If you have a composting thing, you know that you can breed red wiggler worms in kind of like a bucket thing. So they eat those. I think that's the majority of what they eat here in captivity. Good question. Can you incubate their eggs when then release for increased survival? So the best thing to do if you come across turtle eggs is really just to leave them alone. I know it is, I would probably think the same thing, get excited about, trying to keep them and grow them and make sure that they survive. But there are natural things that kind of happen out in the wild that we call natural selection. So a turtle either survives or it doesn't. So yeah, I think it's really awesome that we want to do that, but I think it's best if we just kind of leave them alone. And then here in captivity, we actually don't, they don't lay eggs. We don't have to worry about that. So if they did, though, we would probably do something like that where we incubate and then potentially try to get them back out into the wild, but we don't do any of that here. Briar wants to know if they bite. They can, yeah. So typically, this turtle probably isn't gonna bite me just because like she is mad at me or anything like that. She probably just might bite me because my fingers probably look like little worms. So she probably thinks maybe it's just a worm or something that she can eat. It's really not an intentional bite. Are they born with their eggs? I believe so. And then the male turtle will fertilize them, and then they will lay their eggs. But I believe they're born with them, very similar to humans. Good question. How many types of turtles are in New Hampshire? That is a fantastic question. So if we think about painted turtles being the #1 or most abundant species in New Hampshire, we have snapping turtles, we have box turtles, and wood turtles, which they're not as abundant, but we do have them. We have Blandings turtles, although they're pretty not as abundant, or pretty, I guess you could say, I think they're endangered. And then spotted turtles, which are also endangered. So those are the 6 that I can think of. That does not mean that that's the only turtles that we have. Those are just the ones that I can think of. Are they born with their shells? Yes, they're born with these little baby shells. They're really small, and then as they grow, they get bigger along with their body. Yeah. Ooh, Lila wants to know, asks if painted turtles eat fish. They can, yes, absolutely. So these guys, we talked about where they live and how they live in aquatic settings, so things like ponds and swamps and rivers and things, and how they're going to, swim around in places like that where fish are going to live as well. So the fish are going to, maybe the little tiny fish, are going to get eaten by these guys. Yeah, really good question. How big are they when they're born? So a little painted turtle can be about the size of a quarter, so pretty small. And then, as we know, they get bigger and older. If turtles like to eat worms, then do people who fish sometimes catch turtles? They could, potentially. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but there's always a possibility. Also, why are they called painted turtles? So for those of you that might have missed it in the very beginning, these guys are called painted turtles because they look like they are painted underneath. So they have this orange and black spots on their side. They have a bright yellow belly. They have yellow and orange on their face and their legs and things. So they get their name pretty much just because they look like they are painted. Good question. All right, what other questions do we have? If we don't have any, we can wrap it up. Why do they have nails? Okay, that's a good question. So they need nails basically to protect themselves. They don't really hurt me, but they are pretty sharp. So when you think about a predator or something that maybe is trying to attack it, they can use their nails to kind of protect themselves. They can actually use their nails and things to dig in the mud. So when we said that these guys are hibernating in the wintertime, they are going to need to go down into the mud and kind of burrow themselves in. They can use their nails to dig around, things like that. Is their sense of smell good? I believe that they can't smell anything. That is a good question that I don't know the answer to. So I will say you should look that question up and maybe report back to us if we're still here. Can we see the painted turtle walk? Sure. So a lot of people think that the question above there is how slowly do the turtles move? These guys are actually pretty quick when you think about a turtle. We always, you compare the turtle, the tortoise, and the hare having a race. You think about a turtle being pretty slow. These guys are actually pretty fast. So I'll put her down and we can see if she wants to move. So she's a pretty quick moving turtle. She's coming over here. This is where the rest of them are. They're all hanging out, waiting. But yeah, you can see she's a pretty quick turtle. They're relatively good at exploring and hanging out in here. They get time where they can actually come out of their tanks and run around, which is funny to think about. We'll let her move around for a little bit while we ask finish last couple questions. Is it a boy or a girl? How can you tell? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but in case you are new, I will just explain it one more time. So the way you can tell between male and female turtles is by the underside of their shell. So if you look at this turtle, you could see that she has a very flat shell. If it was a male or a boy, you could see that they have an indent in their shell. And the reasoning for that being so that they can hold their eggs, the females can hold their eggs inside of their shell. So it makes more room for the eggs in there before they lay them. Really good question. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up for the day. I just wanna thank you all for coming and supporting us and coming and watching our live videos. And if you're interested, maybe check out our website for all the other awesome, cool things that we do here at New Hampshire Audubon. And yeah, I hope you will check back. I believe we are doing some story times as well. If you caught that one yesterday, that was really awesome. And then a few more live animal talks. So I really hope that you enjoyed it and can support us any way you can. I just want to check back in with Cynthia. She Googled it and said that turtles do not have nostrils, but they smell well on land and underwater. Cool. Thank you very much for contributing. Ooh, she says that they have bumps under their skin that have nerves to pick up scents. That's really cool. So I'm gonna have to learn more about that. Thank you so much for coming and have a good day.